Oh, what's up, funnel headers? Right now, as you can see, we got this flat six turned kind of vertically because today is the day that we go ahead and pop the heads off this thing, and we're gonna go ahead and split the halves as well. So with that, I'm gonna shut up and we're gonna get right into it. Alrighty, so here's the deal. If you've missed the past content on this particular car, this is the engine out of my 2005 Porsche Boxster S. That is the first year of the 987.1 generation Porsche Boxster, the one that kicked off the Boxster Cayman of the mid to late 2000s. Anyway, this is a 3.2 liter M96 engine, known to be a very good engine overall. And again, if you missed it, this engine does have somewhat of an intermittent tick sound that comes and goes. Seems to happen mostly when the engine is very hot. So we've got the engine out to try and remedy that issue. Now, in the last episode, we did find that actually 3 of the hydraulic lifters in bank 2 were collapsed and bad. One of which, the worst of the 3, was on cylinder number 4. It was one of the intake valves in cylinder number 4, which could very well explain why we were getting a misfire on cylinder 4. Basically, if one of your 2 intake valves is not opening nearly as much as it should be, then you don't have as much air coming into the cylinder on the intake stroke, then your air-fuel ratio is off, therefore you get a misfire. So that could very well explain our misfire and our tick sound. As part of what I love to do, which is water-cooled restorations to keep these now aging cars from the mid-2000s on the road as long as possible, we are just going to tear down this engine completely and put brand new connecting rod bearings in. And of course, while we're in there, we can inspect the cylinder walls to make sure that there's no bore scoring. And then we'll probably put new piston rings up in it at the same time. You know, basically mechanically refresh this engine completely. Cars like this are the last of the golden era of the very amazing analog driver's cars, and we've got to keep them around, you guys. We've got to keep them around. So that's what we're doing. Water-cooled restoration. Let's keep this thing going for a long time to come. So I'm going to shut up now, and we're going to go ahead and get the cylinder head off of bank 2. Actually, quick note on that. The reason we're taking off the cylinder head from bank 2 is because bank 2 is the one that is more notorious in these engines to suffer from bore scoring. Hopefully we don't see that, very much so crossing our fingers. Let's go ahead and take this puppy off. Alrighty, we have the bank 2 cylinder head off, which means that we have the cylinders exposed. So right off the bat, these cylinders look amazing. Just to give you an idea, oops, I got a little bit of soot from the piston. Of course, there's always going to be a little bit of carbon deposits on top of the piston, but nothing out of the ordinary here, which is great to see. Cylinder 5 is the same. It looks very good. You know, you see the normal ring marks, the gap from the ring. Of course, that's not scoring or anything weird like that. That's very, very normal to see. That's just where the gap in the ring is. That's why it's consistent between these 2 cylinders. Let's rotate the engine a little bit and see what we can see. All right. So cylinder 4 right now is at bottom dead center, more or less. And this one looks very clean as well. If we were to be seeing bore scoring, you know, it's at the bottom of the cylinder, we would probably still see it right at, you know, coming up the cylinder wall a little bit. Anyway, this is great news. This is great news. The cylinder walls look great. Pistons look great. Okay, well, we got one head off. There's 2 of them. Time to do the next one. Here is our bank 1, and things look beautiful. Obviously we can't see cylinder wall for 1 yet, but 2 and 3 look great. Let me turn the motor here a little bit so we can actually get an idea of what's going on. Okay, cylinder 2 is at bottom dead center. No scoring. Man, this motor is clean. This motor is clean. All right, cylinder 1, the one we have yet to see. And there it is at bottom dead center, more or less. Boom. Looks great. Yet again, this bank looks great as well. So I guess all that's left to do is get these case halves apart. This is one of those big life moments when we are about to split the motor. Well, that happened. Dude, the rotating assembly is so freaking heavy. Like, that has got to be probably 70% of the weight in this engine. Here it is. It's just that innocent little looking thing, but it is like solid steel. And obviously it's very beefcake. Like, look at all the structure in it. It's very beefcake, but good news is we just got that out and we got bank 1 out, and bank 2 is just this lonely little guy still sitting on our engine stand over here. So while we still have bank 2 just chilling on the engine stand, let's go ahead and take a look at the condition of those cylinders now that we have the pistons out of them. Of course, before we just looked at the overall cylinder condition when the pistons were down at bottom dead center. And in this case, we can literally look at the entire thing. So let's check it out. Alrighty, so again, bank 2 is the notorious cylinder bank for starting the bore scoring that can happen with these engines. And so yeah, we're looking here at cylinder 4, 5, 6. And let's start with cylinder 4, our potential problem child here, the one that the Porsche dealer claimed the sound is coming from. And this is all just dirt from the piston coming out just now. Good news, this thing is absolutely spotless. It's, of course, you know, these cylinder liners are hard to get on film because they're basically like a mirror finish. There's absolutely zero scoring on this puppy, so that's great. Let's move on to cylinder 5. Let me give it a quick wipe down, and then we will inspect. So again, the camera's having trouble focusing because it's like, is this a mirror or like, so sorry if it's kind of unclear, but it's harder to see on camera than it is on like in person. But this this cylinder is also spotless, so that's great. And last but not least, cylinder 6. Let's give it a quick wipe down before we take a look at it. Again, looks very good. Oh yeah. Well, this is great news. Like they say, you know, the 3.2 liter, again, is not prone to having this bore scoring issue, and that seems to be holding true with this engine as well, considering these cylinders look spotless. I guess, you know, we can go ahead and check bank 1 as well while we are at it. Obviously, bank 1 isn't the problem child, but might as well check it because we've got it all. All right. This is cylinder 3. It's maybe a little easier to see the condition with the cardboard behind it. But yeah, as you can see, this one also total mirror finish. Let's move on to cylinder 2. Of course, there's going to be dirt because, you know, the engine's dirty on the outside, and there's a little bit of carbon on the pistons, and stuff kind of falls into them as you're taking this apart. So, you know, kind of got to wipe it down and give it a good assessment. But yeah, cylinder 2 looks great as well. Cylinder 1, let's wipe it down. Yeah, all right, cool. To round out the 6 cylinders, cylinder 1 looks amazing as well. As Ellen Engineering will say themselves, the 3.2 liter engine is not known to suffer from bore scoring, and obviously it seems like that is the case with this engine as well. So that is a huge relief. We can rest a little bit easier knowing that. We can run with the current cylinder liners and just keep this thing chugging for many, 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 many more miles to come. Next up, let's go ahead and dive into that rotating assembly and see what we can find. Well, everybody, we have the engine completely disassembled. So we are literally at the halfway point now. We've got it all completely torn down, as you can see. Now it's just time to get to refreshing. So let's go ahead and look at what we found within the rotating assembly. All right, so here are the main bearings. I've kind of gone ahead and wiped a lot of these off so that you can see as well as possible. Couple, marks here and here where it looks like there is some, additional wear. Overall, though, these look decent. I mean, it's good that we're going ahead and replacing these. Inherently, you would expect that you're going to see a little bit of wear out after 97,000 miles. But anyway, let's continue to look at what we've got here. So here's the crank. And actually, the crank looks very good. Obviously, it's, going back to the journals themselves, the crank is protected by the bearings, right? So this is a solid steel crankshaft, and then the bearing material is designed to be softer. So we're not going to get any score marks on the crank unless something went terribly wrong. This would be the cylinder 4 on the crank, and just kind of going around, you can see that there are absolutely no score marks. And it looks very solid. I did the same thing, just kind of looking over all the rest of these, and all of these look very good. Let's go ahead and analyze what the connecting rod bearings look like for each cylinder. By the way, before I start going into this, let me just preface. So of course, on this side of the connecting rod, you would expect this bearing to be worn more. Why? Because of course the piston pushes the connecting rod into the crank on this side. So when there is wear, it is always basically on this side first. So, looking at cylinder 1, okay, yep, we can see that there is in fact a nice little wear mark there, but not too terrible overall. Moving on to cylinder 2. Ooh, okay. So you can see that this mark is a little bit bigger, and in fact we can actually start to see some copper coming through that. So that's not ideal. This one was certainly on its way out. Cylinder 3, ooh. Okay, again, about like cylinder 2. We don't see the same level of copper that bearing 2 had, but weirdly enough, this patch does appear to be a little bit bigger, even though it's not quite as deep of a gouge. Okay, actually I'm gonna skip cylinder 4, just to keep you guys in suspense a little bit. We'll make our way back to that one, but we'll skip to cylinder 5 for now. As you can see, this one looks pretty good. Similar wear patch size to what was on the cylinder 1 connecting rod. Nothing super severe. And cylinder 6, not the smallest we've seen, but it's can actually start to see some copper through that one as well. So let's get to cylinder 4. Yep, there we go. So this one is a large patch. Quite a bit of wear, and we're even starting to see some wear kind of up the connecting rod bearing here, but man, this wear patch is not insignificant, and we can see copper coming through. When I say we can see copper coming through, I mean, so I believe these are copper at their core, but they have some coating around them. So basically, once you get into the copper, you've worn through all the protective material, and you're into the actual meat of the bearing, which is very much not ideal. It could have been way, way, way worse. So there was no damage to the crank as a result of this, but obviously some significant wear to the bearing itself. So very good that we are doing this, because that bearing is for sure done. So not gonna lie, a nice little bit of restoration of faith, at least for me personally, in Porsche dealerships, because when we started out, I honestly was kind of 50-50 as to whether or not I thought the Porsche dealership was trying to just take this guy to the cleaners, or if they're being genuine. And actually, I think in this case they were definitely being genuine, because yeah, this cylinder 4 connecting rod bearing is on its way out, and at its end of life, and so they nailed that, and they nailed the exact cylinder that it was coming from too. So let's kind of take a second to consider what we have so far, and some conclusions that maybe we can draw from this. First of all, we know that from bank 2 we have 3 bad lifters, one of which was on cylinder 4, and it was the worst of the 3, and causing our misfire most likely, and it was causing our noise. That's my belief, that the noise was probably from the lifter due to the oil getting very thin, loses viscosity as it gets hot, and then can more freely flow out of the lifter as the cam is putting pressure on it. Start to get some compression, and then you start to hear some noise from that lifter. So that explains the noise, but what about the metal? So the metal, I believe, primarily was coming from the connecting rod bearings. Now, just a quick note on metals within the oil. I did finally get the Blackstone oil analysis results back. Unfortunately, the results were pretty inconclusive because there were just under 300 miles on that particular sample, so they didn't want to say anything definitively about the metals that they did see in the oil. However, you can see here in these results that aluminum and iron were both at or near the industry average, and copper obviously had ticked up a couple points as well. And again, this was after not quite 300 miles of driving. So in my mind, that is indicative that we are getting higher than normal metal generation per mile. All right, so that's a lot of words, but let's also talk about why this is happening. So these aren't known to be unreliable engines, and I know a lot of you are going to dispute that. I mean, there's plenty of M96, M97 engines with 200,000 miles on them with the original bearings. This engine clearly was not going to make it to 200,000 miles with these bearings. There's no way. It is my strong belief that the reason we're seeing a lot of these 3.2 liters and just, the 987 engines in general starting to fail with regards to their connecting rod bearings is because of this very long oil change interval that these cars had. These cars had a 20,000 mile oil change interval from the factory. I mean, they wouldn't run like a Honda Civic with 20,000 miles on a single oil change. Why would you run a high performance engine in a Porsche for 20,000 miles? It makes no sense. And actually, Porsche has since changed this interval back down from 20,000 miles, I think down to 10,000. Clearly, they realized they screwed up once they started to see a lot of these engines having failures in the market, and probably at some point attributed it to high oil change intervals, just running old dirty oil through the engine over and over and over again, and eventually leading to that. These engines aren't unreliable. The owners were just doing what Porsche said to do with regards to the oil change interval, and now here we are 18 years and almost 100,000 miles later, and we've got to replace something as serious as the connecting rod bearings. All right, so this has been a long video, and that was one heck of a rant, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up here. We now officially have the engine completely torn down and apart, so we are at the halfway point, you guys. It's very exciting, and all we need to do now is order a ton of parts. Once we get those parts, then we need to go to the machine shop, and then we'll start to assemble it. So very exciting stuff coming. Please do me a huge favor and like this video. It really, really helps out my channel a lot. Thank you so much for watching Fun Ahead TV. You guys are the absolute best. I super appreciate you guys watching my silly videos, and yeah, I will see you all in the next episode.